You won't often see legislation or any bills floating around Congress until years after it's been bouncing around in culture, right? Media, entertainment, etc., and just people's day-to-day lives. And that's and because I'm a Christian and because I read the Bible, I do believe in good and evil. And a lot of this stuff I see, I have no other context for it than, this stuff is wrong. This stuff is wicked. And even when I talk about culture, not all, and a lot of it, to me has a spiritual foundation, right? And then a lot of the stuff that we see in the headlines are just manifestations or a byproduct of that, the spiritual side of things. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, what are you talking about? You're crazy." That's okay. I don't need for everybody to believe everything or agree with everything I say. I'm just gonna tell people what I really think. But even outside of the spiritual aspect of our cultural unraveling, there's also the cultural side, like the totalitarian bent, the communist bent, the socialist bent within our culture, right? If you go, like if your viewers go start studying up on cultural Marxism, right? If they go start watching Yuri Bezmenov, have you ever watched Yuri Bezmenov videos? The ex-KGB
I've watched a couple.
Okay, he talks about ideological subversion. He talks about the steps of it, how long it takes. I believe that a lot of what's going on in America right now, it's the old basic: a house divided cannot stand. Right? Let's divide these guys up every which way possible, and then let's start picking them apart. Let's start turning them against each other. And that's what I see. I think that's the biggest problem, because I think that if we were more united as Americans and less divided, I think that there's nothing that we couldn't overcome or defeat. But because we've fallen prey to some of this, this cultural Marxism, and there are several words for it. I think that's one of the most, at least in my opinion, accurate depictions of it. There's a guy named Dr. Vodi Bakum. He doesn't look anything like me. He's a big black preacher. Was going to play pro football, but then, he got influenced and ended up going into ministry. Went to Oxford, a bunch of, very impressive schools, very impressive resume. And he's actually one of the few preachers that I've heard talk about cultural issues. And in one of the interviews I heard him give, he talked about how he was invited on CNN one time when Obama was president. And they asked him, "Do you think now that there's finally a black president, do you think that the culture is going to be more united?" And he said, "Absolutely not." And they were blown away because he's a black guy. And he's like, "Because Barack Obama is a cultural Marxist, like many of his teachers before him." And I think he mentioned Jeremiah Wright, one of the pastors that Obama sat under for a long time. And so when you start to look at Marxism, traditional Marxism, they divide us up by economics: the haves, the have-nots, the proletariat, and the bourgeoisie, right? And they try and divide us up based on the rich and the poor. That didn't work here in the West because of capitalism. And even the guy that was considered, lower or middle class felt like, "Hey, I'm doing okay, man. I can, I can buy a house, I can buy a car if I make wise choices, and I can provide for my family. I'm doing okay." So that traditional Marxism didn't work here in the U.S. What has worked is cultural Marxism. So you just start manipulating the ingredients, right? You take the economics out of it, and that's still there a little bit, but it's not really as effective. You'll see little doses of it here and there, but what you'll really see with cultural Marxism is you start making it about dividing us up via race and ethnicity. Boom. Now we got them.
Sexuality.
A lot. Yeah. And just, right. And you can go really deep into this. I mean, there's a lot of folks that talk about this, Ben Shapiro talk about it, intersectionality, Charlie Kirk's. You can go listen to a bunch of, this cultural division and its origins from many different people. And I've listened to a bunch of it, but that's one of my biggest concerns, because I know that's even in the military. That's one of the tactics that we use, divide and conquer, right? Split them up.
Yeah.
And then they're easier to attack.
I mean, I've talked about this several times, and the thing that I can't ever get to the bottom of is, where is this shit coming from? I mean, because you're right, it's right versus left, it's rich versus poor, it's black versus white, it's gay and not gay, trans and not trans. I mean, there's more. I just can't think of them all. But it's
native
literally
born, foreign born.
Yep.
There's so many ways that you can divide us up, and that's what's being done to our culture. And it's it's like I said, I think it's, besides the spiritual rot, which I think is the foundation of it all.
Where's this shit coming from? Is this from foreign influence? Is this internal influence? Is it both? I mean, where is this coming from? And I'll stop there. I got more I want to say, but we'll stop there. Where do you think this is coming from? Where's the influence?
Well, I think a lot of it started foreign, but I think it started to, like a lot of things, it started to spring up its own roots here, and then metastasize.
Well, there were definitely seeds planted,
right? So, Dr. Vodi Bakum, if you just go Google Dr. Vodi Bakum, cultural Marxism, he does a sermon on it, and he goes through the history of it. He goes through, goes back to Marx. Then he goes, to the Frankfurt School, and how a lot of this stuff then started getting, piped into the West, and how destructive it is. And he gives a very articulate educational breakdown of its origins and what it's designed to do. And so I highly suggest that your viewers go, Google that, or and then you start watching some of Yuri Bezmenov's stuff, right? I'm not sure what your take is on Yuri Bezmenov, but ex-KGB defector, right? Came to the West and started doing interviews, I think in the 80s, and talking about ideological subversion, and some of the I think your viewers should watch that as well. But one of the things that I remember from the videos I was watching of him, he says, you Americans, you think that in the KGB we spent a lot of our money, our resources on the fancy James Bond espionage stuff, like spy gadgets, like that type of stuff. He's like, no. He said, I've talked with other pretty high-ranking members of the KGB that defected like I did. And he said we all agreed that probably closer to 15% of our budget was spent on espionage and that type of stuff. But he said the vast majority of our budget went into ideological subversion, into your schools, into your media, right, into Hollywood, and into destroying you using your own culture. And so, and he goes, he actually, if you go watch those videos, he goes through I think the 4 stages of it. I think the first one is like demoralization. And he actually tells you how long each stage is supposed to take. And so I think we're seeing definitely the latter stages, because even when he was shooting those videos back in,
what are the latter stages? The first one's demoralization.
I can't remember.
Okay.
They're fascinating. And even when he was making these videos, and they must have been in the 80s, maybe early 90s, just you could tell by the picture quality. He was like, it's already complete. That was the scary thing. Even back then, it was like, he's like, we couldn't even believe how quickly it took off here in the West. So I think that's a part of it.
So do you think this is coming from Russia? Do you think it's coming from China?
I think it's coming from
both?
I think it's coming from multiple places. And I think that, like if you go back and, study, Vodi Bakum and some of his history, I think you'll see, it comes even from, Karl Marx and some of those ideologies as well. But I think a lot of it does come from some of our enemies that basically want to destroy us by dividing us.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.